This is the third day of the April 89 7-day retreat in Springwater. Before we get into questions that have been asked, I want to mention that I never repeat a question verbatim. I'm not capable of doing that. Sometimes I write something down a day later. And often it happens that several people ask very similar questions. So what comes out here may be a flowing together of several questions in slightly different words or different words than anyone has asked. Please don't conclude from that your question was not understood at the time, if it sounds different now. That is the beauty of working in this moment, that one leaves what was and looks freshly now. The question about tradition and authority was brought up. The person saying, you try to point out that you're not an authority, that you don't feel yourself in a place of authority. And yet, I notice that this mind makes you into an authority, whether I want it or not. It's of enormous importance, isn't it, to discover that this goes on as it goes on. It needs no reaction of, it's a hopeless case, or woe me, or whatever. But just to see what goes on in the mind. That as this person at the moment, I may meet you in walking, there I have an image of you, or some feeling that I don't have with other people. To just see it, be aware of it. If we're not aware of it, it functions unawares and affects our behavior, action, reaction, without any light. Light here meaning seeing what goes on in the mind, aware of it, conscious of it, if you will. And in uncovering such movements of the mind, there may be an intelligent way of acting. Not out of reaction, which is unconscious. Also, this person said, I'm wondering whether there's I don't remember how it was put. Whether there is an effort, no, this is how it was put. I'm wondering whether there is an attachment here to being non-attached. One has left the attachments to traditional forms, and now it has been replaced with being attached to the fact that one is not attached to forms, to rules. Is there a phobia, the person asked, to being attached to a traditional form? And in that, denying what is obviously being done here, and which has a traditional source in a tradition. Is there a denial of that? And as any such question is worthwhile to look at it, each one of us. Is there attachment to not being attached? Is there an attachment to, or is there a flaunting of traditional forms and establishing a new existence in this flaunting, becoming somebody in that, and in being non-attached? One can't immediately say yes or no, one has to watch it. How can one say yes or no? One may have never noticed it. Bringing things up like this may sharpen the mind to discover something that it hasn't discovered before, that may have been going on. Or one may have looked at it. But that doesn't mean one can't look at it now freshly again, because our past insights have very little value in looking now, particularly if they've become an idea, a remembered affair. So does one have the idea of being detached? What does that mean? One has to look if this idea is there. Maybe this idea is not there. It may be projected onto one. But it behooves us to look and question. It is a fact, isn't it, that all of us come, as we are sitting here right now, out of an enormously old tradition. Not just one tradition, a riverbed of tradition, with all kinds of rivulets having fed and feeding into tradition. Tradition meaning what we do automatically, mechanically, in a learned, programmed way, which may include the worship of the tradition or the reverence, revering of the tradition, as also trained. Without a spark of awareness and insight, all we are is tradition. New tradition or old tradition. Does it sound as though I'm rationalizing away something that was said? There are cushions and mats here which are found in the Zen tradition. They are also found in the Tibetan tradition. And there may be traditions that we don't know of which also use mats and cushions. We have a schedule that definitely comes from the Zen tradition. Where that tradition picked it up from, we don't know. It may have been an innovation, or a historian may find that it dates back to who knows how long back. In dropping or having dropped elements of the tradition, which many of us have been trained in, this was rarely a revolutionary or reactionary event, even though if we talk about it at times or joke about it, it may sound this way. But we have sometimes endless staff meetings on whether to sound a block or not. whether to sit 30 minutes, 32 or 25, how long to walk, and so forth. And we come, like the thing with the dinner, we often don't come to a conclusion about it because we're advocating and trying in our minds either advocate our own preference or imagine people who come here, what do they want? How do they respond to when the kitchen door is closed for 10 minutes and they can't get in? How does it look? Is that, again, the feeling there's authority here, the kitchen people are in charge? We look at these things and we are open to suggestions. And we usually, when we do drop something or change something, say, well, let's try it. If it doesn't work, we'll reinstate it. But we can't just discuss forever. We'd like to take a walk up the hill too. So it's not a band of revolutionaries trying to smash tradition. Not that the person meant that or said that, but sometimes I think there may be a feeling in people's minds. We're trying to look very carefully what is helpful and what evokes not just the past Zen tradition, but the feeling of school, private school, public school, home environment, which has associations of authority, obeying, following, or being the bad girl or bad boy if one doesn't follow or if one hears these rules and transgresses. So we try to be very careful with all of that, which means we're not perfect and open to input at any time. Is there a denial of where certain forms come from? We don't occupy our minds a lot with, we know where it came from. Are we denying it? Does it sound as though we're denying it? I'd have to think or look more into it and talk more. I personally don't feel that there is denial. But in wondering what tradition one is issuing from, it goes into the infinite past. We talked a little about it when we talked about sitting motionlessly quiet. There have been seals excavated from as far as 5,000 BC or 3,000 with individual people sitting. Of course, on the seal they are motionless. And one has observed animals sitting quietly. One has heard of ancient people who were here before the hectic new invasion took place, who spent time sitting quietly, maybe in a circle, maybe alone. I've got a friend who is of American Indian origin. He told me, not traditionally being taught, he doesn't remember that, but spending afternoons or hours going out on a rock in the area and sitting still. Is one following a tradition, which means there is an idea in the mind of, this is my tradition, and again, very easily an attachment and identification with my tradition, which informs me, makes something out of me through the attachment? Or is one discovering something about sitting quietly? Not because it is a tradition to be revered or acknowledged or denied, but because there's something happening which is different from our hectic, anguished thrashing about, day in and day out, lifetime after lifetime. One person mentioned that years ago, being associated with a different spiritual tradition, practicing center, and having had a practice having to do with attending to the breath, and she said that felt very, very good. To be attending to the exhalation. There was a growing awareness in her life. And there was appreciation of a discipline, of a structure. And somehow, now, this was a day ago, I don't know how this person feels today, finding herself here without any structure, without any practice, the question came up, what's the difference between being here or stretching out on my living room floor at home when I have some time? I don't know what the difference is. One is free to look. See, I didn't enter into this authority thing. I did it once, but we'll do it again. What you make out of me, we'll come back to the practice. What you make out of me, the images that arise in your mind and that are attached to or projected onto me, are for you to see. I can't see them for you. We can talk about it. But the coming upon it, and therefore the bringing to light what before operated subconsciously or unconsciously, that can only happen in each individual human being. I can't do that for anyone. I have to watch here where the images are informing about myself or you. And the seeing of them, dispelling these images, so there's the freedom of relating and looking and questioning or being still. And to not dispel an authority image because one thinks it's bad or the authority says it's bad to have an image of authority, but to understand how it functions, what it does. If we follow authority as we have been brought up to do, in the home, in the school, in the church, in the spiritual training center, follow authority and the convenience of it, the being taken care ofness of it, the always knowing what to think or what not to think, what to do, what not to do. In that, a human being atrophies. The capacity to look and think intelligently for oneself atrophies, or maybe never even comes into being. We train it out of our children at a very early age. So, can one observe that as it happens, as one is told in a group what to do, what to think, how to proceed? Notice what goes on. And when there is not this authority structure, the hesitancy or incapacity to behave, one feels as though one doesn't know where or what or where to or where from. And to start with that, start this way. Not give up because of it, but to welcome this newborn insecurity. And to notice the urge to want to get guidance again, be told, get an answer. So in observing the breathing in a place which does not prescribe observing the breathing in a certain way, at certain hours, for certain lengths of time, is what one had as one's practice, is that in shambles now? Or what is in shambles? The breathing is there, isn't it? It's here as well as in the Himalayas or in the south, west or east. It's there. Can one listen to it without making it into a practice? Without sort of zeroing in on it, as this is what my task is, and therefore everything else that comes up has to be shunned or shut out as a distraction. In listening to the breathing, a thought coming up, why not see instantly what this thought is about? We usually don't. Even if we have a practice, we get overwhelmed by thought and emotion. But why not find out what these distracting thoughts are, what their topic is, what they're all about? Or what one maybe used to call a distractive emotion of fear or anger. The breathing is not separate from the fear. The breathing is not separate from the anger. We may either be with the breathing and count that, or be with the anger and try to be with that. Why can't we be with the whole thing? Not keep living in fragments as we have been trained to do. Not call one thing distraction and the other one practice. One thing important and the other one unimportant. But to see what it is we call important and what it is we call unimportant. Doesn't take tremendous reverie. It can be seen at one glance when there's awareness and attention. And how anger is linked up with our whole life. All of our ideas about ourselves, about others, our wanting, our feeling of inferiority, wanting to have our own way, our past traditions and education and backgrounds and experiences. There's no such isolated fragment as anger. It is tied up with our whole life. And can one see it that way, listen to it in that way? And also notice the breathing, which may get very tight at the moment of anger, constricted in the throat, choppy maybe because the heart starts beating, churning in the stomach or intestines, tension in the muscles, maybe blood rushing to the head. Can notice a narrowing down maybe of hearing or seeing, wanting to lash out, and then all what we talked about yesterday, all the headlines. I'm justified to be angry, I shouldn't be angry. How can he do this to me? Listen to all of that. And feel the breathing too. Is that possible, or does that sound impossible? It's not impossible. One must have no conclusion about it and no practice about it. But face what arises as a whole. And does the question come up, well, how do I do that? I don't know how to do it. Is one interested in it, in finding out how maybe a moment of calm breathing, which it's in the awareness, and the dog barking, and the birds twittering, somebody moving, it's there. And then suddenly, some remembrance, one may have not noticed it, but the whole system agitated in anger. Can one pay attention to what is happening? Not make a practice out of it, a piecemeal thing out of it. And that is not restricted to being here in this room. It can happen on the living room floor. Particularly if one stretches out to be still with what is. Not picking on what should be or what one should be doing or what one should be thinking about. But open to what is happening throughout this organism, in conjunction with what happened throughout the day. All the humming, the motor running noisily from work and being with people, having difficult interactions, or the traffic, the exhaust. And maybe a bird singing in a tree, if there's a tree in front of the building. Maybe there isn't. Does one see the sky? Maybe not. Listening and attending with one's total being. Not just with the mind, not just with the conditioned responses, but with the heart, with the ears and eyes, the nerves, the bloodstream, the whole being, listening, attending to what moves it and jolts it and agitates it or quiets it down from moment to moment. Sometimes people say to me, I don't care what you say, but I'm going to observe my breathing. That's fine. That's okay. needn't be anything, because it isn't anything. If one doesn't label it, know it. Then what is one breath? If it's not known, not practiced, just, listening to it, and careful with the word listening, it is much more than listening. As for the very first time, never been here before, never happened before, never, the next breath is this. And the birds are no distraction. Unless one thinks they are. Unless one thinks they are birds and, wow, a pileated woodpecker or something. Now we've got one on this land. And the mind as often doesn't observe the breathing anymore. It's now with something else. Which happens. Not to judge it, it's not right or wrong, it happens. When there's a coming to, a waking up, the breath is right there. It's been there all the time, thank goodness. One person said, I'm noticing that practically all the thoughts that come up have something to do with wanting. Always wanting something. Wanting to augment myself were some of the words used. Wanting more. Wanting to be something. Wanting to have something. And then the person said there's also at times a stillness, a motionless stillness, spacious. When there's no wanting. And then the thought comes up, I want to investigate where the wanting comes from. Is that also wanting, he asks? Is it? It's a moment of no wanting, of spaciousness, stillness, clarity maybe. And then actually what usually comes up is wanting to keep that, wanting that to last, to become one's possession. And in that, is it in that there is wanting to augment oneself with having this spacious stillness? And of course, and as was observed by this person, the moment the wanting comes up to have that or to augment oneself. There is no spacious stillness. There is a narrow track of wanting. And as that narrow track of wanting proceeds, goes on, can there be a coming to? If it proceeds mechanically or unconsciously, there is no awareness of it. It just goes habitually, wanting, wanting, wanting. But for some reason, which I can't explain, there's a coming to one. There's a waking up to what is happening, finding oneself in the stream of wanting. At that moment, can one wonder about it? What it is? Or coming to, noticing all the past thoughts were about wanting? Does the wanting just take a little bit of a different turn and now wanting not to want? It is just a change of trains. Hopping out at a station, no time to stand quietly, but the other train is already there and you hop in and off it goes. Is wanting itself investigatable? It is. One may say, well, how do I go about that? I don't know, one has to want to find out. What is it all about? How does it come into being? Realizing and having noticed time and time again how one is possessed by wanting. Wanting in the twofold sense of that word. Wanting something and also feeling wanting, like lacking. And because of this feeling wanting, lacking, wanting to fulfill oneself with something, the object of the wanting changes all the time. Different things are tried out or repeated or then changed. But the movement of wanting remains the same. Is that, can one look into that? Become aware of what goes on in this process of wanting or desiring. The word doesn't matter. And in looking at it together, right now, can we look at it together? We came from the fact that when there is quietness and stillness, spaciousness, at that moment there is no wanting. Why is there no wanting at that moment? Is it because no idea pops into the mind about what one could have? Because that part of the mind of imagining things that could be had is quiet. It's not energized. The energy is in the stillness of listening. The stillness, the spaciousness of listening inwardly, outwardly. That's where the energy is, not in an idea of what one wants, what one could have. Also, in that quietness of listening, there's no idea of me being quiet, me having that. That idea is not energized. That, let's put it this way, that structure, which is a memory structure throughout the brain, me, what I am, what I want to be, that is in abeyance. It has no energy. The energy is in listening and looking. Quietly, spaciously. No idea of me listening, no idea of what I want. That's not wanting, is it just there? Or does the thought come up, I wish I could hear that during my everyday office time? Then an idea is born and there is wanting. The sound is made into an idea, bird song, and in imagination I can hear a bird at my drab desk, where there are no trees outside. There's not even windows in the office. And imagining how nice it would be to hear bird song while working. And with that idea, me having that, the mobilization of wanting. Is that how it works? Can be the idea of food. Moment when it's hungry, or some people say I don't need to be hungry to want food. The idea of food and imagining oneself or thinking about oneself having this food and then wanting it, desiring it, with all the movements that the physical organism mobilizes to get something. The heart may beat faster, the muscles become innervated. Is that the origin of wanting? Imagining something or seeing something and imagining oneself having that? And then, of course, the imagination goes on. How nice it would be, and elaborating it and wanting it more and more. The bird, the food, the man or woman, the clothes or the vacation, a car, a better place to live, a different companion. Imagination, me having that, and the body responding instantly. Even as we started out, the quietness, a still moment of listening, and then conceptualizing this moment, making an idea out of it. This is stillness, this is quietness. How nice. Can I keep it? Can I have it again when I need it? And then the feeling of wanting, particularly when one notices how it withers away, it disappears, because in wanting and desiring and all the physical movements that go with it, there is no peace. There's no quietness. Listening gets narrowed down into listening for what one wants, or looking for what one wants. One person told me that once, who for the first time in a retreat had the job of doing the flowers. And she told me my whole strolling through the woods changed, because now I needed to look for things. Does one know that? All of a sudden one thinks how nice it would be to have a little bouquet of flowers on my table. And everything changes. One now looks for something to get. And greed may arise, wanting another flower and another to add to the colors, and how nice it would look. And maybe people would comment on it. I'm not talking about this particular person. That's what happens in us. And the quiet, aimless strolling is over. It is now under the auspices or under the sponsorship of wanting something. And can one detect the change? See it. Not, I have to fight my wanting, or it shouldn't be like this, but be aware of what happens. I remember in years gone by going nowhere without a camera, a movie camera. Became very good at it, at least I thought so and people thought so. And the whole traveling changed to find the right spot, the right action with people or without people, directing things. It was a great relief to put the camera down and never touch it again. With which I'm not saying anything about taking pictures. Somebody else may take pictures differently. For me, it was getting something. There was actually for a while the feeling I was getting more out of my travels. Because there was this collecting thing going on, wanting to keep this and to show it to people and to please them. Be somebody who takes such beautiful movies. They weren't that beautiful. What about the question, where does wanting come from? Not what we just described, wanting to get something, imagining it and oneself having it, but this feeling of lacking, this feeling of lack in oneself. Where does that come from? Or one may say, I'm not so interested where it comes from, but it's there all the time. Unless there's a temporary distraction or temporary fulfillment, and then there is the feeling of lack again. And in asking why or where does it come from, we're not putting the question necessarily historically. Although in having such a question, and in such a question grabbing one, things may come up quite spontaneously. What happened to one years ago when they'd never remembered it or so. But the question itself of why this feeling of lack, where does it come from, is not meant to direct the mind into historical channels. If it happens, then that has its own significance if something comes up. Or a dream comes up. People often ask me about dreams, what I'm interested in. Or would I interpret them? I don't interpret dreams. We're dreaming most of the time. But the fact that a dream comes into awareness is its own significance. Just as becoming aware of an imagined food or person that one wants, and seeing that, this is just what happens, seeing it at a glance. That has a significance of its own. It doesn't need to be interpreted. Something happened and is seen. It's not just ignored or running unconsciously. It comes to the light of day. So what about this feeling of lack? Can it be observed? as it manifests itself, how it manifests itself, the movements to fulfill. And again, the manifestation of a feeling of lack. A new movement to fulfill, a new movement to be something, and the feeling of lack. Can we live with that? With eyes and ears and heart and body and mind wide open. So we're learning as we're going. Not what can I do about it? I should be rid of it. I should have this therapy or that therapy to not have this feeling anymore. And I'm not talking against therapy. Just looking at the thrashing about of the mind. Anything but just be in the presence of something that seems so inalterably there. No matter what we do. And being still in its presence, still and yet open to watch it. Not knowing what to do about it. Not looking for a way out or a way in. Just in complete touch with it, not as a separate me having that lack. Because there's no two, there's only that feeling of lack. It's not me that has it. The me is the lack. The feeling of lack. It's not two parallel streams. We think that way because we think about feeling a lack. And then we say, I have this lack, and with that establish an I and a lack as though one had the other. But the observation that we're talking about, or if the word observation creates difficulty, the awareness, the non-separation in that feeling of lack is not a doing. It's not a looking for a solution. It's a complete unfolding of the problem. As it manifests in our life. Not in my life, in human life. We will end here for today.